Now halfway through the championship season, which means we have a good idea of where each team is going to finish. So with that being said, we've teamed up with Championship YouTube legend Ben HD to make our Championship league table predictions. What we've done is I've made a league table, Ben's made a league table, and then we've kind of just... and hopefully we'll come together to make something that is inevitably completely wrong. But it's entertaining. So here we go, I'm Ryan from the second tier, and these are our league table predictions with Ben HD. So Ben, we'll kick things off with the relegation battle. We've gone for a pretty similar to one to how it is now, really. Are you kind of in the same boat as me, where you just can't really see it changing?
I think so. I think that especially when it comes to Barnsley and probably Derby at the moment, the one team that I'm holding out maybe a little bit of hope for is Peterborough, just because we've seen a few glimpses, albeit they have been quite few and far between so far this season, that maybe if they can build up some sort of consistency between now and the end of the season. But that's really it, to be honest with you. I think that in terms of the other two, it's probably sadly the case that they are gone by this point. But who knows, we've seen crazier comebacks in the past, haven't we?
It says a lot about Barnsley that we've got them bottom of the table, despite Derby having a minus 21 point deduction, and I think that says a lot about how terrible Barnsley have been this season. But I agree with you. Peterborough, I have a small amount of hope for. If anyone is going to get out there, it's obviously going to be them. It's just they have been so poor across the whole season, haven't they? That I really, really struggled to give them much hope either.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think that the new manager coming in at Barnsley's probably just been left with a little bit too much to do. And although there have been some positive shoots and things like that, it just feels like it's too much of a mountain to climb for them.
Let's go to just outside of the bottom three then. We're looking at Cardiff, Reading and Hull. And they were the three teams I thought who I think could be involved in a relegation battle and could be looking over their shoulder in the latter stages of the season. But for me, I think the bottom three are just too far gone. Are you the same as me?
I think so, yeah. I think that with these three especially, some things could come down to the sort of January business and how they do and things like that. Reading, obviously, with their situation at the moment, I think that maybe at times there has been a little bit of an over-reliance on John Swift, and obviously his contract situation is a bit of an interesting one at the moment, and there has been a little bit of interest in him as well from some other teams. So, you know, if they were to lose a player like that, you know, maybe they could drop like a stone towards the second end of the season. But I think that if we were to compare those three man for man to the three we've got in the bottom three at the moment, I think they'll all just about have enough to survive this season. But yeah, it may go close between that last relegation spot.
Hull were a particularly funny one for me because I wasn't sure if they're going to carry on taking off and get away from the bottom three, or whether this is just kind of a green patch that they're hitting and then they'll go back to being bang average Hull from earlier in the season. But because they've had this green patch, it will probably just keep them safe. Reading are funny because they've got players coming back, haven't they? Like Lucas Shaw, for example, which could be a big boost for them as well. But their squad is looking quite thin at the moment and will probably have to strengthen in January. Cardiff are probably the team I struggle to pinpoint the most because with Steve Morrison, I just can't figure out what's going on there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I do understand that. They're trying to sort of blood through a lot of youngsters at the moment. It is quite the switch in play compared to what we were seeing at the start of the season, and that team probably isn't where, you know, it was a couple of years ago when we all thought they would be in and around and amongst the top six at the moment. But yeah, a lot of sort of spinning plates with Cardiff at the moment, and they are probably that unknown side that we talked about so far, which really could go either way.
And just looking slightly further ahead, we've got Birmingham, a side who I was quite hopeful for earlier in the season, but I think due to many things like injuries, players being recalled from loans, they're now looking like they could be in trouble, but I think they're probably just a bit too strong and will probably end up settling for a nice 18th place finish or around there come the end of the season. We'll move on to Bristol City and Blackpool, Ben. Two teams who have, you know, had kind of contrasting starts to the season, really, haven't they? Blackpool were doing really well at one point, but have kind of fizzled out, whereas Bristol City have been around 17th pretty much all season, haven't they? Looking at Blackpool, do you think they're just kind of levelling out at this point?
Yeah, sort of. I think that even during that good run of form that they went on, I think that if you looked into sort of like the underlying numbers during that time in terms of like shots faced, in terms of shots they'd taken and things like that, it did seem a little bit unsustainable by the way they were sort of going about things. But I think that they've got the players in that squad now to go ahead and ensure that they won't probably be dragged into anything, further below them. You look at the players out wide like Josh Bowler and Keshi Anderson, who I think have adapted really well to this level. I think that players like that and of that quality will ensure that they don't drop all too much lower. But yeah, that good run they went on just seemed to be a little bit of a purple patch for them.
I'd agree with that. I think they've got enough now to at least keep him safe in the division. And obviously Critchy's doing a fantastic job. Can we point out, by the way, if Blackpool do finish 16th, that is a ridiculous season for their standards. And that's no disrespect at all, because I think from memory, the last 3 seasons, the highest promoted team has finished is something like 18th. So for Blackpool to do it, especially 16th, it's not bad going at all. Just above them, we've got your boys, Ben, Preston North End. I think you had them in a pretty similar position to me. Are you thinking 15's a good season?
I think I'd take it from where we sort of were at the start of the season, and we didn't really have much of a direction that we were going in. And I think that what will most likely be the case for North End from now until the end of the season is we start to see a bit of a process, and I am expecting there to be some sort of rough patches along the way. It is quite the shift in styles that we're going for now. A lot more sort of on the ball playing out from the back, and as a result of that, there'll probably be a few occasions where we'll ship 2 or 3 goals in matches and things like that as we try to get used to this new style. But as a first season under Lowe now heading in a new direction, I think that North End fans would take that at the moment, and sort of hopefully we'll see the sort of things to come in the future under Lowe.
Let's look to 13th and 14th, the end of the bottom half of the table. We've got Huddersfield and Swansea, 2 teams who at different stages of the season were looking like they could challenge for the top 6, but based on what we've seen recently, I don't know about you, I look at Huddersfield and think they probably just lack too much to even consider finishing in the top half, whereas Swansea, kind of the same actually. Swansea obviously going through a bit of a transition. Same for you, Ben?
Yeah, I think so. Huddersfield have been that really weird team because they're in the top 6 at the moment, but I think we all had them sort of down there near the bottom at the start of the season, didn't we? And then even when they've been on some good runs, there was at times maybe a bit of a reliance on set pieces. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but lately there have been a few sort of more positives in terms of the actual overall performances. We've seen a bit more of that pressing football that Corbrand's all about, but I can't help but feel like out of those sides that are currently sort of in and around the top 6, if one of them is going to drop, it's probably going to be Huddersfield, but hey, they could prove us wrong.
I completely agree with that. Huddersfield are probably the most unpredictable team in the league for me, because you just never know what's going to turn up. And when you're that inconsistent, eventually you just end up having kind of a middling out over the course of the season. That's why I got them slap bang in the middle, 13th. Speaking of slap bang in the middle, and speaking of another team who are quite unpredictable, is Millwall, who just draw too many games, don't they? And overall, the squad's lacking depth, and that's been the story now for Millwall for the past few seasons now, hasn't it? But again, 12th, when you consider the whole picture, I'm guessing is a decent season. It's just they're lacking too much, aren't they, to be a serious contender for the top 6.
Yeah, it feels like Millwall have been at this stage now for quite a while, where they've been this solid mid-table club that have just needed those extra few bits, and this season it just feels like they'll fall just that little bit short again. Looking
up to 11th, another team who were in the top 6 for most of the season, it's Coventry. So 11th, I mean, that in the grand scheme of things, that represents a good season, but considering they have been in the top 6 for so long and looking like they could actually be a genuine top 6 contender, 11th, I suppose in a way, is a kind of a disappointment, isn't it really, Ben?
Yeah, it's a difficult one with Coventry because, like you say, when they have such a good start to the season, expectations change and things like that. At the start of the season, I'm sure the Coventry fans would have, bit your hands off for a top half finish. But at the moment, what we're seeing from them, that sort of levelling out that we've seen from a few of the other clubs who had, those fast starts to the season, 11th, I think, is realistic at the moment, but who knows? If they pull off a couple of deals in January, we could see a second win from them.
I think they're just lacking way too much going forward. You look at Victor Gyökeres, for example, who was unbelievable in the first quarter of the season, then has completely dropped off. And then Callum O'Hare has not really got going this season, has he? He's always lacked a bit of final product, and that's really shone through this season. So it's strange because I really like Coventry as a side. I think Mark Robbins is doing a fantastic job, but just lacking too much, unfortunately. Luton, we've got 10th, which, again, another team who I think 10th in the grand scheme of things would be a bloody good season, wouldn't it?
I think so, yeah. And maybe even some of their underlying numbers so far this season could suggest that maybe there could be a smidge of a playoff hope come the end of the season if they do some business in January as well. But another team who you'd probably throw into this part of the table where all these teams are quite interchangeable, really, with where we could have them. I don't think there's all too much between this part of the table.
No, I completely agree with that. Luton are the kind of side I look at who I think are very capable of finishing top six, but considering some of the teams we've got just above them, I think teams are better suited, unfortunately. And I think Nathan Jones is definitely on the right path to Luton eventually finishing in the top six. It's just this season in particular, there were too many teams up there who I think are just probably too good. Let's look to Stoke then, who we have ninth. A team who earlier in the season I thought were looking very, very, very good for the top six, but mainly down to injuries. I struggle to see that happening now, Ben.
Yeah, I think that's sort of the thing with Stoke, isn't it? And it sort of feels like, Groundhog Day from how they were last season, really. And you feel bad from them from that sort of aspect. But key men that are going to be missing, you look at the other teams who we've got in the top six at the moment, I think that will probably be the thing that makes a difference here.
Losing Harry Souttar's a massive, massive issue for them, isn't it? Looking at eighth, we had QPR, another team who I thought they are probably almost looking very likely to finish in the top six this season, but because they haven't played in so many games and other teams have made up ground in that time, I'm looking at them now. I can't believe, if you told me this a month ago, Ben, I'd have said absolutely no chance them finishing eighth, but that's my gut feeling now, them finishing outside the top six.
Yeah, I think at the start of the season, absolutely everyone had QPR as their dark horses, didn't they? I think we all had QPR in the top six, but there's just been, obviously COVID has affected them and missing games and things like that, but lately there's just been maybe a little bit of a feeling of inconsistency, and we look at those sides who we've got in the top six at the moment that we think may just have that ability to grind a little bit more than this QPR side has.
Yeah, they definitely need to strengthen up front in January for me. Charlie Austin hasn't hit form at all this season. He's been really missing big chances. Then you've got the likes of Andre Gray, Lyndon Dykes has been injured for most of the season, so that's one area where I think they need to strengthen. If they do that, then they may be higher up in the table than we expect. Now, seventh, we had Forest, Ben, which when we were doing our separate tables, you had them, I think, about 10th, which I was a bit surprised about. Why did you have them so low down?
This comes back to what I was saying before, really, where I don't think there's massive amounts between these sides in this part of the table at the moment. And everyone that I had from sort of 7th to 10th, I'd say are quite interchangeable, really. I think there's a thing with Forest as well where it probably hinges on what happens in January for them, as will be the case with the majority of teams who've got in and around this part of the table at the moment. I expect that defensive record to be strong from now until the end of the season because it's Steve Cooper, but maybe lacking that little bit of firepower.
I had them in the top six for any Forest fans who are going to get angry in the comments. But I think I completely agree with you. They need to get a striker in January. It sounds like they're going to get one, but there are quite a few clubs who need to get strikers in January. In 5th and 6th, we've got Middlesbrough and Blackburn, two teams who have been going exceptionally well recently, but from the looks of it, we don't think this is a green patch. We think this is going to continue across the course of the season.
Yeah, I mean, some Blackburn fans might be angry that we've not got them in the top two at the moment, but I think a playoff finish would be absolutely fantastic. Once again, a lot of this hinges on what happens in January, relating to Ben Brereton and things like that. But in terms of Borough, I think they're quite a sure bet for the top six at the moment. I think that the way they're playing under Wilder now, it looks more than likely that they'll probably strengthen going into January as well. Yeah, I've liked a lot of what I've seen from Borough lately.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think Middlesbrough now are looking... I'll be very surprised if they don't finish in the top six at this point, because they just seem to be like a steam train just ploughing through anyone that's in their way. I actually had Blackburn outside of the top six in my individual table, which... but I just worry too much about what's going to happen when this good run of form ends. Will they just go back to being the Blackburn that we saw before, who were, fairly average? And also there is the big question mark, Ben Brereton Diaz. If he goes, I think they're a bit stuffed, because he has literally scored half their goals this season. That is a lot of goals to lose. third and fourth, we've got Bournemouth and Sheffield United. For any geniuses out there who have figured out now who our top two is, you'll have realised that it's basically the top four that many people are expecting at the start of the season, all the parachute payment teams. Bournemouth, Sheffield United. We'll start with Sheffield United, Ben. The team at the moment who are looking very much the team to beat, aren't they? Because they look a completely different side under Paul Heckingbottom. Are you thinking playoffs is a sure bet now?
I'd like to think so. I think that this COVID break that Sheffield United have had has probably come at the worst point in their season, really, because they really started to generate that bit of momentum. I think that in the final third, they've looked absolutely fantastic in terms of creating chances under Heckingbottom, really. Something that we couldn't say about them quite at the start of this season. And that defensive record, which has improved so much recently as well. I think that those two things combined will probably be enough to carry them into a top six place this season.
I can see them having a similar season to the likes of Fulham and Villa from seasons past, where they just plough through everyone in the second half of the season, but they've left it too late for them to, actually be in the top two. I think they can definitely run it close. I just think maybe they've started so poorly that it may cost them come the end of the season. Bournemouth, you had in the top two, which I thought was interesting considering they've been fairly bang average recently. I had them fourth. Are you quite sure on Bournemouth for the top two?
I'm a little bit split on this one and the side that we've got in second at the moment, because I think a lot depends on what that team in second goes ahead and does in January. But as things stand right now, I back Bournemouth just about for that second place. I think they've shown at the start of the season that they are capable of going on the run, and as soon as they pick things up again, I could see that happening. But with players returning from injuries and things like that, I think that defensive record and that stability that they showed at the start of the season will slowly start to come back as well. But yeah, a lot hinges on what that team that we got in second does in January at the moment for me.
Yeah, I agree. I think Bournemouth, it's going to be really interesting to see what kind of a team they're like in the second half of the season. I really struggle to pinpoint whether the poor run of form they've been having recently is a sign of things to come, or whether it's just a really long blip and they'll go back to being the side that we saw earlier in the season, who were just absolutely class. But yeah, Fulham and West Brom we've got in first and second. West Brom, I think, if they sign a striker, then that's a big difference maker, isn't it? Particularly a big American striker. Don't want to name any names, not Josie Outstall. But if they manage to get in a big striker who can score goals, then that could make a world of difference for them, can't it?
I think so, yeah, because what we've seen from West Brom, although I think there's been a lot of frustrated Baggies fans so far this season in terms of style of play, how things haven't quite stuck for them in the final third, but what they've built up until January has been a solid foundation at the back, and while they haven't been scoring all too many goals, there have been chances which have been created. I think out of their last 5 matches, they've had 3 of them where they've had about 30 shots or something, and they've only scored a maximum of 1 goal or something like that. So someone like Daryl DK, who we might be hinting at, could make all the difference for them. He showed how clinical he was at Barnsley last season. I think that small difference there really could be all the difference between West Brom and Bournemouth, who I don't have all too much between at the moment.
I absolutely agree. I think West Brom have got midfield, defence sorted. It is literally just the striker. Sort that out. It could be a different beast in second half of the season. But top of the table, top of the pack, we've got Fulham. And you're still thinking that they're the team to beat in the division this season, Ben?
I think so, yeah. I think that in terms of the most complete side, even though they have had this tail off in form at a similar time to Bournemouth, I think that if we look throughout their team at the back, midfield and up top, I really don't think that anyone particularly competes with them, to be honest with you. Similar to Bournemouth, we saw them go on a fantastic run at the start of the season as well. I think it'll only be a matter of time before they properly click back up into gear. It would be entertaining if they didn't, and they continue to have this slide off, and they fell down a little bit, and those 2 spots are opened up. But I think it's going to be a case where Fulham will end up storming it, and that second spot maybe will be a little bit more open.
Completely agree. I think in terms of Fulham not getting the results, they've still been playing well enough for me to show that it is just a matter of time before results get back on the board. And when you've got the amount of talent in their squad, class is permanent, as they say. So yeah, I think Fulham are definitely still going to finish in the top 2 at the very least this season. If they don't, I'll be extraordinarily surprised. And for me, are a safe bet for the top 2. Hence why we got them top of the table. So those are our league table predictions. On the screen now you can find our individual tables. Feel free to roast us in the comment section below for whatever it is you disagree with. Let us know also where you think your team is going to finish in the Championship this season. Make sure you like and subscribe for more content like this. Also subscribe to Ben HD. He makes brilliant content all to do with the Championship. You can find a link to his channel in the description of this video. Otherwise, thank you for watching.